So well done, you've made it to the third and final part of Stalking Boudicca. In this part we'll be looking at the three best candidates for the site of Boudicca's battlefield. That's the three best at the moment, although none of them may actually be the site. Well, I say that, but I've got a sneaking suspicion that the third site on this video may actually nail the site once and for all. And so to the final and most southerly of the actual sites on Watling Street, and this is the site of Dunstable, which was nominated by a couple of people, the local archaeologist Barry Horn, but also Nathan Ross. Like High Cross, Dunstable is very interesting in terms of a strategic location. The crossroads at the centre of Dunstable is where Watling Street crosses with the Icknield Way, which is an east-west trending street. So a massive Roman communication hub lost under a very suburban roundabout. The Dunstable topography is very striking. It's quite a deeply incised valley rising from the south to the north, which has given it this favoured position as a suitable topography. Following Barry Horn and Nathan Ross's nomination of the site some years ago, the Battlefields Trust again attempted a survey of the area and again drew a blank. There was some suggestion that some pottery lumps were in fact slingstones, but nothing of this has been proven, partly because the most likely point of contact in the battlefield would be under the school playing fields, and number one, these have been significantly graded, so any archaeology would be deeply buried or lost, and number two, because the Battlefields Trust couldn't actually get permission to go and search the site. The topography of the east and west sides of the valley leading to Dunstable is very dramatic and would certainly serve well as defensive positions. However, the Tacitus description describes a site that was a closed valley, that was a throat. We have that going into the site, but the rear of the site, the northern end of the site, was where the Icknield Way was, where Dunstable is, which would have implied that that was open. And not only open, but a significant transport route. So I think there's a real risk with the Dunstable site, that it recognises the steepness of the topography to east and west, but it's not a closed valley. It's very open, it has a stream running through it, and it has the potential to not be blockable to the north by woods, as Tacitus described. So the position for Tacitus would never have been as defensible as is alluded to in the Tacitus text. Stepping slightly off Watling Street, the next site is Tring, which is here as almost a twin to Dunstable. It's got a very similar topographic situation, very similar problems with the topography. And there are two guys who've nominated this. The first is Derek Cundy in his book The Vengeful Queen from 2015. He nominated a site at the end of the Tring Valley, almost facing northeast. And the second is Nathan Ross again, who's a big fan of Dunstable, who's fallen on this site for similar topographic reasons to Dunstable, but also because of some archaeological finds, including a 1st century Roman helmet, and I believe there are some slingstones involved in this one as well. As with the Dunstable case, again we have a very strong valley here, so a very strong valley to bottle up by closing up the northern end, but exactly the same problems that we have at Dunstable, where we have the Icknield Way run almost teeing the route through to the north. So the rear again could hardly be defended, and if the Iceni were moving from the east as well as the south, or had the potential to move from the east as well as the south, there'd be really no topographic way of defending this, and the likelihood is that this was a route way and it's a river valley, so the woods would not be impenetrable. So I think this falls foul of the bottleneck problem that Dunstable has, in that the site is not sealed at the north end. However, I think of all the sites, Tring and Dunstable are probably up there in the top three for me. They're very, very good topographies. Many of the other sites we've had have had no defile, whereas these have very, very strong defiles. The only problem being they're not closed defiles. in that they're not plugged at the north end, and an enemy force could potentially get behind the Roman forces. So for our 12th and final site, we're going to scoot north again on Watling Street, but not quite as far north as the Watford Gap, which I mentioned before in relationship to the Clifton-on-Dunsmore site. This site is Churchstowe in Northamptonshire, sandwiched between Clifton-on-Dunsmore and the Cuttle Mill site, and I've saved it till last because it's my own personal favourite. Strategically, the site lies in the headwaters of the Nen Valley. The Nen wraps around both sides of the ridge that contains Churchstowe, and it also sits just south of the Watford Gap. The significance of this is that the site is both on Watling Street, which we knew was Paulinus's route of march to and from Mona, but also at the head of the Nen and the Ouse. It marked the river navigation point that went directly from the centre of England all the way to the Iceni lands in the Wash. The valley is unique amongst the candidates in being a closed valley. That's to say, there is a northern ridge that extends from Weedon Beck southwesterly to a point where you can see the Castle Dykes fortification, and then another ridge extends from the Castle Dyke fortification north east again, creating a bowl that has ridges all the way around. And this is quite a remarkable topography. It means that a fortified ridge here could only be approached through a single mouth on Watling Street from around about the position of Weedon Beck. So with this site we can imagine the Iceni forces either coming in through the Ouse or the Nen and mustering at a point somewhere to the east, possibly speculated on the edge of Northampton on some old Iron Age hill forts, and then moving to contact en masse with a Roman force that's spread around the Churchstowe Ridge. The Churchstowe Ridge shows signs of fortifications. Some are ascribed as medieval, some are ascribed as Iron Age, but it's interesting to compare the two key features, which have both in their own time been described as Roman encampments. You can note almost a playing card feature, but these two features, Castle Yard and Castle Dykes, which are adjacent to each other at the ridgetop, are of the same dimensions, and they're the same shape, to the extent that they even have the breaks in the perimeter banks in the same places. So we have a very strong topography, and we appear to have archaeological remains in terms of earthworks still extant on site. There's also a triple ditch system, which may be maybe Iron Age, Neolithic, but might also be part of a Roman defensive system cutting the ridge off to traffic. There's also some archaeological evidence of Roman occupation at Castle Yard. You can see in one of the images that there's what's been ascribed as a chisel or a pilum shaft, and a spoon, which has also been attributed as a pilum at some points. And these were found in conjunction with a 1st century Iron Age brooch, all in the ditch adjacent to Castle Yard. Most recently, in the church at Churchstowe, it's been pointed out there's a stone which has not been attributed to Romans, but appears to show two Roman soldiers engaged in some kind of slaughter. So you see the figures, there's two figures, the one on the right, the one on the left, both seem to have what could be interpreted as Lorica segmentata shoulder pieces. The one on the left, in their left hand they seem to have a blade, the one on the right seems to have a blade in his right hand. The left hand figure appears to be grasping with the right hand the forearm of a figure whose outstretched hand below is a wide open palm. The one on the right seems to be stabbing upward into something else. So with Churchstowe we have a fantastic strategic position. We also have quite a unique defensive topography that appears to match Tacitus' description very well, insofar as it's a closed valley. It's not a valley one can pass through. And it actually is a valley, and we know that several of the sites from Manchester down to Clifton-on-Dunsmore don't actually have the defile as described by Tacitus. And one intriguing possibility is still out there. The There is a sculptural head that was found a few miles south of the site. It's in the British Museum now. It's one of 3 that were found at a 1st century temple with some Celtic material around it. It's a Romano-British figurehead of a stern-looking woman, an angry-looking woman, possibly middle-aged with very striking hair. Was this possibly where Boudicca was buried? Was this possibly a temple to Boudicca that was set up within a few miles of the site? Well, it's adjacent. Well, it's adjacent to the Cuttle Mill site, but it's also very close to the Churchstowe site. So that's an exciting prospect to end with. Thank you very much for listening. I must stress, we don't know where this site is. There are 12 good candidates here. Almost certainly none of the candidates is correct. Almost certainly the battle site is out there, still waiting to be found.